Hi and welcome. Today our talk was initially supposed to be about corporate identity, and I was going to speak to you a little bit about typography and the applications of that. But looking at your projects, I feel that it's a better approach to look at your entire project in a more holistic sense, and therefore I've changed the title of the presentation to Developing a Holistic and Lifestyle-Based Approach to Branding. I'd like to initially start with what corporate identity actually is. I feel, and this is my opinion, that it's a little bit more of an old-fashioned approach to branding projects and corporate identity projects. And as you can see here, corporate identity, is defined as about being internal activities that shape perception. So this would entail the corporate design, such as the logo, the style guide, the color palette, and so on. Corporate communications and corporate behaviors, which is, the essence of the company, and the internal communications and so on. So this would be normally how people would start a branding project, and this also entails the brand identity and the brand image. But today I'd like to kind of show you a little bit of a new way of looking at branding projects in general.
A winery, it's a new brand. I need a logo, a style guide, a color palette. And that's, where a lot of us tend to start. The corporate communication is the internal communications, which is all part of this. The corporate behavior is the essence of the company. So the core values, the brand promise, the slogan, and so on and so forth. So back, when I was studying, this is how we always used to approach sort of corporate identity design. And then the brand identity and the brand image would come after that as well. So this is now not the first thing that we should be looking at, but one of the last things. And then now I'm going to show you how to do that. The holistic brand strategy approach is kind of the new way that a lot of us are starting to look at, and the whole world is starting to look at corporate identity and brand strategy design. Maybe some of you have heard of Simon Sinek and his book, Find Your Why, which I actually also have here. It's a very, very good book. He basically talks about when you're starting with the corporate identity of a company, is you don't start with just, what do you do and let's design a logo for it, but you have to figure out the essence of why the company does what it does. So it's basically something that comes a little bit more of a motivation from the heart. So he has a wonderful video. I'm not going to go into detail about it, but please look at his video on YouTube and read this book. It tells you exactly how to go into the core of the motivation of why behind the company does what it does. And then you go and see how to do it, and then, what they do. So it's sort of a inside out based approach. So now with social media especially, and with all this Facebook and social sharing, what we used to start with corporate identity, and brand image, it was a one-way street to the consumer. So on the left you see that model where it was like a top-down approach where we created our logo, our style guide, our business card, our slogan, life is good or whatever, and then we just like fed it to the consumer. But now with social media, a lot of people are starting to look for a reflection of themselves onto the companies. And lifestyle branding is therefore more important because the consumer has their own opinion and they want to be in an engagement with the company. So the holistic brand strategy and the consumer go back and forth together to sort of create this dialogue, if you will. So instead of being one-sided, it's now a two-sided approach. And in all of our projects, we really need to handle this with this approach. So this is an example, okay? So a corporate identity based approach, Kelebek Mobilya. Here we see Kelebek Mobilya with its butterfly logo, and then there's like this one slogan, and they have chosen their colors, and they have a photo shoot, and they have this wonderful family that they've just, magically created out of like some models or stock photo, but it's obvious to us that this is all fake and it's all very staged, okay? So this is my example that I found of what you should not be doing anymore. And this is what I see, and a lot of people now see as being a very outdated approach. So, Kelebek, it's very obvious. You just put a pretty butterfly, some nice colors, and, that's, people think that that's the branding. But now, and this is a wonderful example of this company that I follow called Yoli and Otis. So they are like one of the pioneers of lifestyle branding on Instagram, and they're a company. They started with children's clothes. And this is basically like just some photos they have on Instagram. So their whole brand strategy is to tell stories of themselves and their family, what they like to do, what they like to wear, this sort of their living room, their travels, their little photos from, little corners of their home, or, when they take some walk somewhere, they take photos and put them online. So, having a look at and it's a really clever brand strategy, because it doesn't look like a brand strategy at all. It's just a beautiful Instagram of like a peaceful lifestyle, but it's become a very, very lucrative business and a very famous product. So they are very, very good at managing their strategy. So when you see the difference between this and this, you really see that the second one, it gives you more of a connection, because it's a more holistic approach, and it invites people to be more engaged and to see a reflection of themselves onto the brand itself. So it's sort of a sneaky kind of branding without actually branding. And it's starting to be very successful, and it's what a lot of companies or family businesses especially are starting to do. So a study that I would like to show you that does adopt this approach is a winery and farmhouse that we presented to in Istanbul. It's a concept development project that was presented, I think, around 2 months ago, and it's still in the works now. And that's done by us with Rework Agency. So we can look at our work there, which is all, this lifestyle branding based approach. So this was basically a winery and farmhouse that had all of these assets. So it had, museum, a restaurant, a vineyard. It was mainly a vineyard, but inside it also had the hotels and spa treatments and events and so on as well. And so we started looking at trend reports. So it's, many of you may know the WGSN reports, or the online trend reports, the trend hackers and so on. So a lot of our projects, we start with looking at the reports to see like what is in trend now, what the travel trends are, or whatever project we're doing, like what people are looking for in brand at the moment. So what was really striking to us with this one, when we looked at the tourism sector, was gastronomy tourism was really at the forefront. So the later reports did say that most travelers are guided by food and drink, and the people that are guided by food and drink spend 23% more during their travels, and most of their spending is actually on food. And so in this case, we wanted the gastronomy tourism to guide the product development. So we really actually wanted to start here with a strategy. And so within the gastronomical tourism, we did look to see that beer and wine routes make up 25% of this. So we started very strong there. And when going into the details of that, did discover that people wanted to discover places for authentic culinary experiences. So things that were local, authentic, and original to the place that they were going to. So that formed a good part of our starting to think about what we want to do in the project. And then coming to other points, it was that travelers don't just place importance on food byproducts, but also look for concepts that implement zero waste, plastic-free, animal welfare, and general sustainability. So these are sort of things that you start to think about and say, okay, so my branding approach should be based on the trends and should be based on what people are doing right now. And it starts to make you think about, maybe how this is going to start to maybe visualize in your mind, or, how you're going to start to structure the project. So, yes. So with the gastronomy tourism, what was very important was shared experiences with people. So people being inspired with each other and sort of creating this sort of collective way of traveling and sharing food and sharing experiences and travel. So this was, again, another trend that sort of added on onto the link of things that we were researching when creating the branding for this winery. So again, you know, people both want to share the experience, but want to share the experiences online. So when thinking about designing spaces and designing the experiences, you want to create spots for social media, sharing and ideas. So creating also visually inspiring experiences that people want to, you know, snapshot and share. And, you know, that's also a very big part of the entire project. So the motivation of people that we wanted to show was, you know, that people were very focused on the personality of both themselves and of the place that they were visiting, on lifestyle, on their past experiences, their perception, and visuals were very important to motivate people to go certain places. So, you know, in lifestyle branding and holistic design-based approaches, you need to really create a backstory. So everything is now about storytelling. Like I said, it's not like Kelebek Mobilya just putting, you know, a butterfly onto a logo, but, you know, maybe creating an entire story behind the butterfly. So here in this case, in the local and authentic gastronomical experiences, for example, people want to know the story behind the experience itself, such as, you know, the history of the recipe in the menu. So where that comes from, you know, the chef that actually made it, or even the cutlery, like for example, in this project that we did for Turk, the bread knife even had its own story, and it was made by an artisan in Japan. So, you know, even people that use the butter knife, you know, that's even written on the menu, why, you know, where that comes from, what kind of wood it's created from, who made it. So these things are starting to become very important in sort of authentic experiences, you know, within this sector. So again, looking at trends, one of this year's big trends that came about, especially when everybody started to spend a lot of time at home and with COVID, was this trend called cottagecore, which is sort of, some people argue that it's a little bit of a romanticized version of you know, pastoral living. So, but it's, you can sort of adapt it to a modern farm living aesthetic and sort of an ideal agricultural life. You know, people started to want to move away from cities a little bit more. So this was another trend that we wanted to implement into the project itself, because people actually have now new values when it comes to, you know, their sort of lifestyle choices and living in nature, maybe moving away from cities, or living, you know, half in the city and half outside of the city. So, you know, a lot of, again, with this whole sharing thing, you know, family and friends theme is very important. So, you know, creating experiences around family and around sharing was also important for the project. So all of these were really like sort of looking behind and seeing what motivates people, and, you know, what we can create in this project, which is, you know, on trend, and also, you know, what people want in this day and age. So the strategy that we developed in the end was to create a gourmet area, so restaurant, wine, art and treatments, and a luxurious boutique modern farmhouse. So our assets, again, you know, the vineyard, restaurant, museum, events, hotel, treatment center, and so on. So we were able to categorize, you know, in different areas that we wanted to focus on this entire project. The vineyard was actually just one part of it, and it sort of plugged into different parts of the project itself. So we wanted to, again, bridge together all these assets under one holistic concept. And the concept we started to study after that. So to tie everything together, again, you need an overall idea and an overall holistic approach. And so for all the materials, the ideas, the visuals, everything to tie together. And once you have that, everything comes together much more easily. So it's not just about sitting, you know, drawing a butterfly, but, you know, again, why do we use the butterfly? And what does the butterfly represent? Or what, you know, what does it signify to us? It's more important because that's going to shape the way, again, the butterfly's wings are shaped, or what colors they're going to be, you know, because you really need to go deeper into, like I said, the core, the why of the entire project. So you need to view basically the brand as a character. And what we used to do, for example, when I was in Yargıcı, and you know, we worked on this together before, was that if you viewed the brand as a person, even, you know, you give it a character. You can even do this in your mood boards, where you make the brand into, you know, cut something out of a newspaper or a magazine or on Pinterest, and make the brand a blonde girl with long hair, and you know, and put her dog next to her, and put a picture of her father, and maybe put, you know, what she likes to eat and drink, and what she likes to, what sort of flowers she likes, and her favorite color. And you can, if you even characterize it that way, it's an easy way to develop the brand as a person, and then sort of pull the values of the brand out of that. So that's sort of a holistic understanding of how to create that sort of sensory and cognitive perception of the brand. So the holistic brand strategy, I'm not gonna go too much detail into all of these, but it is made up of these 6 main areas. So the brand promise is, who are we, and what's our philosophy? What are we going to promise? And this is sort of in you know, all of our communication materials and so on. The personality is, what is our personality? What is our approach to life? What do we like to eat and drink, and so on. The brand artifacts is mostly, you know, this is the sort of corporate identity that people want to approach first, but it's not supposed to come first. Is, you know, our logo, our papers, our you know, visual details, and so on. The brand positioning is the positioning of the brand and what kind of persona that we want to speak to. Storytelling, again, you know, why? What is our story? What is our philosophy? What are we trying to say? And the brand visibility and trust. So what kind of areas do we want to show the brand? You know, are we going to be on Instagram? Are we going to be on Zomato? Are we going to get some bloggers to represent us? You know, and how are we going to create trust in this way? So this is a sort of holistic brand strategy approach that we can use as sort of a backbone to categorizing all the elements we need to study. So the contemporary wine and sustainable modern farmhouse is sort of how we simplified our title. And the brand promise that we came up with was, you know, to approach with family, which be sophisticated and artisan, with respect to nature, respect to artists, would be a local gatherer and foodie. So these were the sort of keywords that came out of, you know, how we would show our brand and what our brand promise would be. And again, keywords with respect to feeling and philosophy was harmony, respect, transparency, peaceful, balance, and creative. So now see, we start to come up with these keywords. So, you know, here we can start to imagine, oh, okay, this brand is going to be sort of these colors and sort of this kind of space and this kind of lighting. So keywords will really help to guide you towards the right direction visually. So our brand promise is what we would like to give to people is a slow, elegant life, organic and local, calm, sophisticated, family style, and healthy lives and healthy living. Again, you know, here we start to, after keywords, we start to think about maybe sort of slogans. Life is passion, life is flavors, life is serenity. Life is art, togetherness, balance. And this sort of, from keywords, we start to have like key sentences that maybe we start to think about. You know, these aren't final slogans or anything. They're just sort of, you know, our philosophy and how, you know, we want to represent the space, or what we want people who visit the space to start thinking and feeling. So then we go into, who is our customer, and we start to, go into the strategy of how old they are, who they are, so their couples, their families, what sort of market group they're in, what their interests are. So here they like short holidays, they have refined tastes, they love natural life and products, they like to experience local flavors, they like to have a sense of belonging, and stories are important to them. So we start to maybe, put these in sentences. So who this person is sort of starts to take shape. So with the holistic brand strategy, the complex has to have a character. And this character should serve a specific trend and be up to date like people's lifestyles. We must show people that at every point touched by our guests, from rooms to common living areas, restaurants, and visitors, at every point we need to show the lifestyle and the personality of our space. And so lifestyle branding is also a way of looking at holistic brand strategy. So lifestyle branding, I think we studied together before with you, what sort of lifestyle we're presenting to people. So we live in a calm, sophisticated area, harmonious with nature, in lavender fields, among wine and wine vineyards, with gastronomic tastes and experiences intertwined with art. We care about the balance between body and mind, and we implement traditional agriculture in a modern way. So we started with keywords, we went on to slogan, and now we're starting to create this sort of sentences of lifestyles. So that becomes starting to take shape and slowly become a story. And then, with this story now, suddenly we have things that we can put in visuals. So we start to, say, okay, what does this person look like, on the top left, for example, what kind of car do they drive? What does the area look like on the, when you first approach it? What kind of wine bottle, or, what kind of walls will be there? What details do we want to see in the catalog? And we slowly start to piece things together. And this gives us the initial idea of, what our space may start to look like, who our customer is. It's not the final, but it's a starting point to start thinking about what our approach will be. Because now we have all the backstory, and all of the backstory in our keywords sort of inform the first visuals that we can put in. So we have these sort of communal spaces. So when we talk about how the visitors like to share things, we think, okay, we want share. And then based on our keywords, maybe what do these places start to look like? So with the initial mood board, which is very, very rough, now we come into something a little bit more refined, and it sort of is starting to get a little bit more distilled. So, what our details are going to start looking like, or what sort of lighting is going to be there, what kind of materials in the interiors we want, or what kind of, chairs and textures and maybe wall art we want, slowly starts to take a little bit of shape. And then we had this world of food. So the wine, determines the menu, and is also very important about sharing in agriculture. And so when it comes to sharing wine, it seeks shareability again, very good looking presentations, freshness and sophistication, just like fine wine itself. And so we wanted this every hour of the day, and is compatible with all different types of wine. So then we started to look into, again, distilling it a little bit more, how, the shapes of the interiors would be, and maybe how it would be, organic and locally grown, but still very sophisticated. And that sort of, all of these things come together to sort of inform our initial mood board approach. And it needs to be sort of a warm atmosphere that's, again, shareable and is from farm to table and full of stories. So even when they're presenting the food itself, it comes in a very colorful way This is even starting to think about, you know, in the winery, how the food is even going to be presented. And, you know, here we chose like a very colorful color palette on the plates, and how everything is very, you know, sort of photographable, Instagrammable, I guess. And, you know, how people would sit at the tables outside and how that lighting would be, and so on. So the brand artifacts, the approach to the brand identity has a holistic design focus, and the brand is fully integrated with the environment. So then now, you know, here we start to come into graphic design. So before, how we had in the initial, like here on the, where it says the Chateau Lacoste, we started to look maybe a little bit how the typography would be. When we look into the brand artifacts, you know, we start to look at examples of how we might visualize it in typography. So I mean, typography is a completely different class. I'm not gonna go into details here, but it's very nice to be able to look at examples and maybe put them on a page and, you know, say, okay, this is kind of along the lines of what I would like, you know, looking at different examples of maybe other wineries or wine brands or, you know, high fashion brands and so on. So, you know, when we put this together, it was all like, okay, well, this is kind of what, you know, the line of sophistication that we want in the project itself. And later on, you're going to see when we put these in the mood boards, you know, how well it all fits together. So here we start to look at examples where, you know, all of this is put actually into material. So it's sort of the same type of typography, but made into a real world. So here we really go step by step. So first you look at typography, and then how the typography is put into the buildings and into spaces. You know, even what kind of lighting, you know, as you can see on all of these, it's a little bit of a, you know, slight lighting, you know, through trees, and you have this sort of feeling of nature and all of the, you know, even when you photograph the signage itself, you know, you see that there's the sunshine is, you know, going through the trees and adding sort of texture on it. So even those details are important. You know, how you actually manifest the typography in a real world environment is very, very important, you know, especially as interior designers or architects. And then, you know, even before we design, we start looking at, you know, maybe what kind of colors, what the menu will start to look like. Maybe what kind of illustration, like here on the top right, you see on the Villa Sangiovese, has a kind of illustration on there. So maybe a very muted illustration, you know, the nice typography, sort of these tone on tone colors, and then the photography would have, you know, some natural textures of fabrics. So, you know, this is starting to look a little bit more, it's starting, you know, we started again with the typography and then put it on the building. And now we have it on, you know, a printed work. And we're sort of starting to develop how the corporate identity design is going to look like without committing to anything, but we're looking at, you know, sort of feeling, again, not specific design, but just how we want everything to feel. And once you have that and that why, then later when you design, you can plug in your own design into your new, you know, these examples and mood boards, which again, I'm going to show you at the end. And you can say, okay, this is either working or it's not working. So it develops a really, really strong backbone for you and a guide for you. You know, so we developed the skeleton. So on the skeleton, I always like to say, then you add the muscles, and then you add the fat, and then you add the clothes, and then you put the makeup on. Okay, so it's all very, very step-by-step approach. We want, you know, here even we start to go into the texture of the paper, again, the type of illustration in a little bit more detail, this sort of tone sur tone approach, how we want things to be handled in sort of the printed materials is important here. You know, again, the typography, or, you know, we would like things to be explained on the menu in a visual way, and explain, you know, the map of the area, for example. You know, this gives a nice idea of how we're going to implement the menu in a storytelling kind of way, for example. And then we go into a little bit more packaging. So we say, okay, so how are we going to start looking with fabrics, or how is the menu going to be presented, maybe in a box form? You know, maybe we have some pens, a notebook that we want to add. you know, developing a little bit more on, you know, the illustration and the business cards and, you know, how tactile things are going to be. So developing on the identity a little bit more. Some more examples, a little bit more detail about, you know, the business cards and the envelopes and the paper, and maybe even how the business card is going to be displayed, you know, on the hotel or in the reception. So it's really starts going into detail. So now when I go in and start designing my corporate identity, I think, okay, well, I want to design a card that is going to look good on this kind of stand. So then you start, you know, thinking about it again, like in a very holistic sort of way with the environment itself. So, you know, I want it to be on this sort of counter with this sort of plexiglass holder, and so it should be this color and this texture and with this image. So that will really create a very strong way of approaching the, I guess, the graphic design part at least. So it's really integrated well with your interior design and your environmental design and your entire concept itself. Then we go in and say, you know, here we wanted perhaps to create a splash of color. So everything has been very refined up to this point. And we keep that refined approach, but maybe we want like a splash of color somewhere to create that sort of modern approach. And say, you know, our wine bottles could have this sort of tactile, sort of a creamy, colorful type of, you know, splash on it, for example. And this was just an idea that later, again, we added into the mood board. This is another approach, you know, some sort of pastel, tactile qualities of watercolor and so on. So at this point we say, okay, these really work as well. So we do know at this point, we want some bright color, we want some tactility, we want some very refined typography, and, you know, we want this bold color to be, you know, in our printed elements at least. And looking at how our signage would be. So refining it a little bit more. Now we know that, you know, we want it to be sticking out on this sort of brass or metal, and we want to use the tactile quality of the walls behind, because that works really well with our style of typography. And then the storytelling, again, we want, you know, to show well-being, the backstories of all our elements, you know, the people, the creativity, and the events that we want to hold in the area. And to create the brand visibility and trust. This is going more into strategy, so I won't explain a lot about it, but, you know, where we want our brand to show. So what sort of mediums we're going to be on. So the TripAdvisor, you know, what PR projects or festivals we want, what sort of blogs we want to be on, what social media accounts. So these are all things that you have to start thinking about as well. So what the visitor strategy and applications of the complex are going to be. Our goal is to spark curiosity and be an attractive center for experience. So the gastronomical experience and events year round where people can feel a sense of privilege. So we went from, we had that whole idea of sharing and staying and so on. So now we get more and more refined where we say, okay, we want people to go and actually, you know, do wine tasting, or we want to invite some special chefs from around the world and maybe have just a chef weekend where that chef can, you know, present us with some wonderful food, and maybe we pick some grapes and we learn about the winery, and it becomes more of this sort of experience where it's very interactive and people can actually be involved in the making of things, the farm to table experience as well. So this informs the living spaces that we wanted to have quiet luxury that was sophisticated and relaxed, and the room need to be decorated with a character on par with general lifestyle choices and tastes. So the living spaces would actually have home comforts as well. So it didn't need to be like they were visiting somewhere, but they were actually, you know, visiting another home. So again, this informs the style of the space, which would be soft tones, natural materials, and sort of a southern air or flair, if you will. So this starts to inform what kind of spaces do we want that have soft tones, natural materials, and a southern air to them. And so we start finding these photos and put them together, and it starts to inform what kind of materials we want, what sort of how homey approach we want. It's still very sophisticated, but it has these sort of warm tones in it, and feels very homey, though it is still very much designed and still very sophisticated, and still gives you a sense of privilege. We had room details, so the hotel rooms, how we would like to detail parts of them, what the textiles would be, what the wooden details would be, and so on. Even going into parts of the room where, we would have sort of notebook, a special notebook for them that would be specially designed, or have a sort of radio, or a pickup there where they could play their own music. So things to really develop, like really details to show the lifestyle that we wanted to portray, and to invite people to really live the lifestyle that we are starting to develop here, but in a very sophisticated and homey way. So in the room details, the organic and sustainable materials were important. So we would use refills, so there would be plastic in the entire hotel. They would only use glass in the hotel room for water, and in all the bathrooms there would be sustainable materials, sustainable shampoos, classic sort of recycled look. It's a sustainable approach, but in a very sort of high class, refined kind of way. So again, looking at the room details, adding wooden toothbrushes and peshtemaz and natural materials, but all in a very classy way. And so within the experiences we wanted to have be so how that would start looking, the visitation of the wine production facilities, and to have people really be involved in the production area and the tasting, and not just go somewhere and drink wine, but really be involved in how everything is made, and from A to Z, sort of understanding how everything really involved with the space and the area, rather than just being a visitor. They feel like they kind of belong there a little bit more. And then in the restaurants, we started developing concepts such as farm tables. So how to create an ecosystem within the space. So they would have their own farm, and then maybe people could even come in and discover the plants. The plants would be cooked by the restaurants later in the evening, but some restaurants do that in Urla as well. And I've seen them, and they're starting to become very popular. And the menu would be seasonal, so it would only be things that are grown in the garden at that point, exactly how nature intended it. And people can go and maybe pick their own things and cook their own food in the evening. So it's really getting an experience and being a part of the space and being a part of the entire, just creating this community of not just being a winery, but being an entire experience of gastronomy, of wine, of food, of nature. And here we start to create this entire story, this whole backstory behind it. So going back to the beginning, this is a really strong why. Why are we going there is to really experience everything to the very core. And that really creates a very strong concept, and the corporate identity is formed by it, but is not the most important element of it. The most important element is really, why are you doing what you are doing? So again, locally and ethically sourced, and because you create a value behind this brand or this space or this experience, it really speaks to somebody's heart. And if you create this sort of ethical value, it's really going to be much more long lasting than maybe, drawing a butterfly, because people are going to feel really morally involved in the brand itself. And sustainability, again, is also a very big part of this. So, you know, it would be waste and plastic free. And so, you know, everything is really, when we go into the core values of everything, it's like local, locally grown, upcycled, compostable, ethically sourced, you know, hunter-gatherer type of approach, and a very short food supply chain. So here we're, like I said, adding a sort of ethical value to the entire project itself. So then we start again, you know, looking at more visuals. Maybe how is the food that, you know, that guy before here, you know, he's picking some food, and maybe in the evening his food starts looking like this. And then he sits with his friends here in this sort of space. Imagine this person that we've created on our mood boards. And that informs how things are starting to look a little bit more. I'm going into a little bit more detail about how people are going to be sharing that day and how that group will look, and what kind of lighting they will be, what sort of space they will sit in, and how they're going to share their food, and maybe what the ceramics even look like, and the cutlery, and the way the food looks, and the lighting, and the fireplace, and, you know, the things that are hung on the wall even. You know, this is starting to really become, okay, we're really starting to visualize and actually feel what we want, what this kind of space and what kind of area we want to create. Maybe we even want a farm shop, you know, where people can eat their dinner, and then they can start, you know, maybe shopping for some wine. And, you know, how will that look like? You start to think about that. And in the farm shop, you know, what type of wine we'll have, what kind of labels. You know, before we had these sort of bright spot colors, and you know, we wanted to see how the packaging and so on would look like in that. And then even maybe looking at photo shoots, so how we can promote the space with the photo shoots themselves. Maybe do some fashion shooting, and maybe you know, work with some fashion designer to sort of promote the space, and start sort of seeing how that's going to look. So the next part is a really good real world application. So we looked at the entire process of this presentation, and I want to show you 3 examples of how you can implement all of this. So this is the first mood board that I created, and these are all from images that you saw throughout this presentation. So you have, again, you know, the logo here, the type of business card that you may have, and this creates a sort of atmosphere of, you know, warmth, and using sort of copper tones and gray tones and cement, and the way the food is presented, things are a little bit more rustic and artisan. So this is maybe one way that we are able to approach this, and this all comes, like I said, from this presentation. So that's my first mood board. My second mood board, maybe we want to do something like this. So again, these are images you all saw in the presentation, you know, but maybe here we want to go with more splash colors. Things are a little bit more bright, things are a bit more bold, but mixed with some white, and you have like maybe block colors everywhere. So you can see like it's the same project, but it's approached a little bit differently. And so this mood board is very important. So after you do all of this research that I explained in the entire presentation, and find the why and the holistic brand approach and the brand values and the philosophy and the reason why people should come and visit you, then you start, you know, piecing all of these together onto mood boards and say, okay, what kind of thing do I want to be creating? So that's maybe a second way of looking at it. And then, you know, another, last but not least, of course, I could do maybe 10, 15 mood boards from this presentation. Maybe it's something like this. So maybe you want a little bit more feminine, a little bit more light and airy, a little bit more pastel colored. Maybe you want the typography to be, you know, a little bit more spaced out, a little bit more airy. So these are three very different visual ways of approaching this winery, but it just goes to show you how you can start approaching your design and forming an identity, a corporate identity, and also a general identity and a holistic approach to your entire project. So basically, we don't start with the corporate identity and the brand identity and the brand image, but we go back to the beginning. And like I said, this find your why. If you can't find the book, please go on YouTube and watch his YouTube talk if you haven't already. It's very, very, very good. So once you inform, what am I doing? I'm creating a winery. How am I doing it? I'm doing it by creating gastronomical experiences and the spa, and creating a hotel where people can pick their own food and share the food in the evening, blah, da, 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 da. Why am I doing it? Because I want to create a sustainable philosophy, and I want to create a community space where people can escape city life and live their ideal pastoral lifestyle, if just for a weekend. I don't know. That's the why, for example, in this project. So that informs the holistic brand strategy, which then informs the corporate identity, the brand identity, and the brand image. So we don't start from the right side, we start from the left side, and then that's going to inform everything else that we do. Because again, going back to the butterfly, don't just sit and draw a butterfly. Think of why is the butterfly flying in the sky, okay? That's basically how to go about doing it now, because this is like a very outdated approach of approaching design. And for a brand to be really sustainable, successful, to touch people's hearts, and to be very long lasting, and it's also much easier for you to start designing. It's much, much easier to design with this whole why in mind, because it just automatically tells you, okay, I need to use this color, this typography, it just, it's just like, it's a complete guide for you to do this, instead of just picking out colors and shapes from the sky. For all of these reasons, that's like the new, or I guess contemporary, in my opinion at least, the correct way to start approaching all kinds of design, not just corporate identity, but spaces and products and everything. So that's basically it. This is just a screen to show what we wanted to present to the client. So we don't just present a corporate identity strategy, but we do like a corporate identity design, a concept development, creating a story, a roadmap, a visual design strategy, agency coordination, social media strategy. So these are all sort of within the entire project itself. I'm just showing you because it's a real world application of what we present to the clients ourselves. So everything is very it's not just creating a logo, it's doing all of these things together based on the holistic brand strategy. So that's about it. Thank you. I'm open to any questions. I hope that was useful.
Thank you very much, Esin Hanım. It was really, really interesting for us and helpful for us, because we are in the middle of the semester.